It was in 2000 that the first time a EU-India business summit was organized in Lisbon. And then after that I jumped to 2004 when the 5th WTO Ministerial Conference was held in Cancun. It is immediately after that in 2004 that the India relationship with the European Union was upgraded to a strategic partnership, which led to the development of and putting together of a high-level trade group, an HLTG, which was launched with a specific task to assess the viability of an FTA between India and the EU. In the following years, there were several meetings that this HLTG has had. And one of the main concerns that a lot of the groups and the social movements have had is that there's been very little access to information on the text. There have been business bodies, whether it is the CII and the corresponding their business counterparts in the European Union and the Europe-India Chambers of Commerce, who've essentially been putting their points of view into these negotiations. And so there has been very little space for people's concerns to be reflected in these negotiations, and likewise even less commitment to have an social and ecological assessment of what these trade negotiations would mean. One is that in December 2009, under a new Lisbon Treaty, the European Commission has taken over the negotiation of investment agreements for all its 27 members. And only the day before, the European Commission has also now announced a new blueprint for the European Union. It's a document called Trade, Growth and World Affairs, which highlights the European Union 2020 trade strategy, which is a very aggressive, investment-centered policy, an outward-going policy which impacts India and several of its trading partners. But what EU is also doing with other trading partners, and particularly the US, one example of that would be the kind of effort that Europe is playing behind another treaty called the ACTA, the Anti-Counterfeiting Trade Agreement, which specifically looks at intellectual property right enforcement in different countries. So while a trade negotiation, both at the multilateral level as well as the bilateral level with its trading partners, pushes up the intellectual property levels far beyond a country's commitments to the World Trade Organization, under treaties like the ACTA, outside of these multilateral negotiations and outside of these bilateral treaties, actually then takes the policing and the enforcement of this to another level. There is also another European Commission initiative, which is called the Raw Material Initiative, which looks at strategic interests of Europe when acquiring raw materials from other countries, whether it's India or China. And in that, it's called the RMI, the Raw Material Initiative, and that goes to the core of some of the mining industry and the mining that would happen in the receiving end of countries. And in that, there are 41, the list of 41 critical minerals which the European Union as a bloc is looking at, and 14 strategic minerals which they're categorized, which includes graphite, etc., which are critical, they say, as raw material for the European industry and businesses.
So there is enough warning from the international organization with regard to the North-South FTAs. The 2007 of the UNCTAD Trade and Development Report clearly sends out the warning, and it says that these FTAs not only threaten the multilateral trading system but also threaten the viability of existing regional cooperation arrangements among developing countries, and most importantly, the option available to these countries for pursuing their national development strategies. So these FTAs, North-South FTAs, clearly threaten the national development strategies. So that brings me to an important issue, is that over the years, there is a lot of hype and hope has been created with regard to the idea of India. It's an emerging economy. It's true, but at the same it's a superpower. It's going to bid for UNSCC. But these are all might be true, or to an extent, but does not reflect the full truth. Because if you look at all the human development indicators, India is equal to least developed countries. So if you look at the UN Human Development, UNDP UN Development Index, or the Quality of Life Index, or the Poverty Index, everywhere we are at par with the sub-Saharan countries, even sometimes worse than that. The worst form of poverty faces in India. Why India is the emerging economy, but it is also the only emerging economy currently facing a current account deficit. And it also faces a huge trade deficit. India's trade deficit is like 10% of India's GDP. So there is a further trade liberalization may worsen the situation, and 3.5% current account deficit is in a way is alarming. So we will be agreeing to reduce 95% of our tariff lines to zero after the conclusion of the FTA. So that is basically would result in the loss of revenue for the government of India. That will forces the government to cut the social expenditure. So it's going to directly affect the poor section of the people. So there would be a burden on people, and the corporate tax is still very low compared to the other direct taxes.
Especially in this current financial and economic crisis, the Commission has one goal. They want the EU economics to grow. They want to have it grow for all price. That's what their success is also going to be measured with. So how do they do that? They want to open up new markets. They want to get the new markets for EU companies, etc. That's why they do the free trade agreements. And the Commission, or at least the Trade Commissioner, has put himself very much on the side of the companies. Lobbying is of course happening a lot from the EU industries, farm industries, all these things, and apparently they have a huge impact, as was just recently discovered also by European NGOs who are following the matter. And I mean, they have access to the text, they have access to the negotiation team. We don't, as parliamentarians. Also the other NGOs don't have. So there's a clear bias in who has access, who gets consulted.